Now, Ireland's largest cannabis community has created a new campaign for policy changes following recent hospitalisation cases in Tipperary. Over the Christmas and into New Year, in fact, there was a warning published by the HSE about the use of synthetic cannabis in jellies that had led to some young people in Clonmel needing medical treatment. Now, as a result, Crainn, the Irish Drug Policy Organisation, says that these incidents show the need for the safe consumption of cannabis through drug policy reform. Well, our news editor, Sheila Naughton, spoke to Ryan McHale, board member of the organisation, and she first asked Ryan what his role was about in the organisation itself.
I'm a board member of Crainn, the Irish Drug Policy Organisation, mainly focusing on non-problematic drug users and then even more focused on cannabis users.
Okay, before we go any further, can you explain to me what non-problematic users means?
Yeah, so the best comparison I would really use is compared to someone listening to this who drinks alcohol on the weekend. Cannabis is the second most used psychoactive drug after alcohol in Ireland, and the vast majority of cannabis users will use it in the same way as someone uses alcohol. And of course, like alcohol, there are problematic users as well. There's nobody denying that, but many people use cannabis because they see it as a safer alternative to alcohol, and I think the scientific evidence supports that.
Okay, yes. So it's just to be clear who exactly you're talking to when you say that. For yourselves then, what is your main aim as a group? We actually first heard from you here in Tipperary around Christmas time when there was hospitalisations over the use of substances or sweets taken of jellies that had synthetic cannabinoids in them, which is something I wasn't aware of at the time, but you've made me aware of. Just explain a bit about what it is that you do.
Yeah, so really we have three main aims, three main kind of target groups that we want to reach out to. Kind of the first is the general public in terms of education and awareness and kind of getting rid of that stigma. So, for example, the information that we provided to you about those edibles that caused the hospitalisation, that was kind of part of our effort to get the correct information out there in terms of drugs and stuff like that, because over the years there's been a lot of misinformation or maybe a lack of good information and more of a panic about drugs, and there's a lot of research and scientific evidence being gathered in Ireland by state agencies and things like that. So we kind of play a part in spreading that around. Secondly, we kind of want to speak with politicians and give them policy solutions to drug laws, because as it currently stands, the drug laws are outdated by international standards, definitely, and even by Irish standards, and the research coming from Ireland, it's outdated. So this is part of the problem as to why this edible kind of crisis is happening. It's because the laws are outdated, and we argue for a more up-to-date policy that includes regulating certain drugs, especially cannabis, regulating it like we do with alcohol, caffeine, nicotine, and regulating it in a very responsible manner. And then kind of the third thing we do is we actually bring people who take drugs like cannabis and bring them together online, facilitate discussion boards and things like that. And that's why we're sometimes actually ahead of the guards and the Department of Health, because we have that access to people who use cannabis, and they talk about what they're finding on the streets all the time. Dangerous stuff a lot of the time, dangerous people, and it's not good for anybody.
I'm curious then, when you talk about engagement and the work that you're doing, and kind of, I suppose, the first-hand information and personal experiences that you have that you could share. When something like what happens in Tip happens, do you ever have an opportunity to speak to, like we have TDs here that I'm sure were concerned and live in the area at that time. Do you have access to talking to people like that, or how do you go about that? Because surely that's something they should be aware of.
Talking to first-hand people, all the time. Just yesterday I was talking to a couple of people because I just put out a message asking if anyone to talk about this type of stuff in terms of like dangerous drugs on the street that aren't what they say they are. So that access is always there, and we hear firsthand that people are having seizures, people are calling ambulances, but I think honestly it's very underreported as an issue. We're getting reports from all around the country the odd time, but I don't think the Gardaí are actually educated enough on the current drug market. And I think we try to bridge that gap between the civilians in the population, the community, and the politicians, because the guards, in my opinion, they're not up to date with this. So if they talk to the guards, many times the guards will think that they've just taken too much cannabis, and they won't bother to test it. We actually don't know how much of the stuff is being tested. Something we'd like to know, but we don't. So we try and bridge that gap and say, this is what we're hearing, here's the evidence we have so far. And the evidence we have so far, even though it's kind of lacking, it's quite strong, it's quite convincing. And I think the evidence that we have alone in Ireland, coming from the HSE, and fair play to them for gathering it, is enough to actually change the laws. But what we're kind of trying to say is this evidence that we have is only a fraction of the real problem, and that's really due to a lack of education within the community.
Because I think that was something that became very aware, or I suppose that's something I became very aware of when that story did come out about around South Tip, was I actually didn't know the difference between synthetic, and I asked you, I remember at the time saying, what's the difference between cannabis and cannabinoids? Is there a difference? And I saw a lot of the commentary we got online from young people who kind of saw this all as a bit of a joke and thought, oh, they just took too much, or they just, like, is this taken seriously? And I mean by the people who are taking it as well.
Yeah, so that's the thing, like cannabis consumers, as I mentioned, it's a lot of people are taking it. So the people who go out of their way to go onto our discussion boards online are usually enthusiasts who do a lot of research. It's kind of like a hobby to them. The same way you'd have craft brew hobbyists or coffee enthusiasts. So it's kind of similar with cannabis. So you can imagine there's different levels of being informed. And I think the education and kind of the general awareness, even among cannabis consumers, and that's kind of what we're trying to do, is to inform them. And we're doing a good job at that so far, I think, but specifically the younger consumers who might not find themselves on kind of Twitter or more kind of sophisticated message boards like Reddit. They won't find this information. It's not getting to them. And I don't think it is overstated either. I think this is quite a serious problem. The same chemicals we're seeing now in Ireland pop up over the last couple of years are actually killing people all over Europe, and they're causing kind of seizures, similar to what you'd see maybe in epilepsy in people in Ireland as well, and it's going under report. So I think it is serious. I think it's also on public representatives as well to raise this issue for parents or family members or mentors as well, because at the end of the day, young people are taking cannabis, or they think they're taking cannabis, or they'd like to try cannabis. So instead of trying to block that out and pretend it's not happening, let's just face the facts and have an open discussion and keep people safe, you know.
So let's talk a bit about public representatives there. I know you've got a campaign at the moment, and when you click into it, it kind of directs you to, I looked there, to all the email address and contact details for the Tipperary TDs.
Yeah.
So what are you hoping to get out of that? And I suppose, who are you targeting? Because I'm thinking of parents listening here who, exactly like you say, will be worried about what their young person in their house is doing when they're not around.
Yeah, so the email template, we are targeting politicians. It's quite a detailed email that we've written up there. It has links to the Tipperary story as kind of a case in point of this happening recently, and it's got the studies that have been published by the HSE. So it's a very informative piece. It's aimed at public representatives, and it refers to reports being done in the Oireachtas at the moment that are looking at this issue in detail as well. And it's bringing their attention that the evidence is all there, and the evidence that it's happening, the scale and the effects, the evidence for that are there, and then the evidence in terms of solutions are already there coming from Ireland, from different committees in the Oireachtas and things like that. So we're basically trying to give them the awareness, and we're hoping that a lot of people do it, because the politicians need to see that the public are now aware of this and there needs to be a response. We're really just trying to put pressure on the different political parties around the country to act urgently.
That's Ryan McHale there, board member of Crainn, speaking to our own Sheila Knock.